The crisp autumn air of New York clung to Zoe Rodriguez's skin as she stepped out of the taxi and onto the cobblestone driveway of her family's estate in Westchester. The maple trees that lined the path blazed with fiery reds and golden yellows, a scene straight out of the dream she had carried with her during the last 4 years she'd spent in London. She had imagined this return countless times, her parents smiling with pride, her sister waiting with open arms, and Daniel, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being, standing just behind them, ready to welcome her home. And tonight, she thought, clutching the small velvet box hidden in her handbag, she would be the one to surprise them. Inside the box was a ring, not just any ring, but the one she had saved for the one she had chosen with trembling fingers and a hopeful heart. After all, Daniel Carter had been the love of her life. He was the reason she endured sleepless nights in lecture halls and worked 2 part-time jobs overseas. Every paper she submitted, every sleepless night, drafting architectural models she had done with his face, imprinted in her mind. She wanted to prove herself, not just to her parents, who had always compared her to her older sister Isabella, but to him, to Daniel, to show him she was enough, and that her dreams and love could be his future. Her heels clicked against the polished marble of the foyer as she stepped inside. The air smelled of lilies and expensive wine, and the house was alive with laughter. A grand chandelier spilled golden light across the guests gathered in her parents' home. She hadn't expected such a crowd. "Connor," she whispered under her breath, nerves trembling in her voice, though she quickly corrected herself. Old habits. Daniel. His name was Daniel now, not the boyish nickname she used when they were teenagers, sneaking out to watch the stars from the roof of her parents' garage. She searched the room, her heart racing with anticipation. Then she saw him. Daniel stood at the center of the room, tall and composed in his charcoal suit, his smile confident in a way that felt foreign to her. For a moment, everything was right in the world again. She stepped forward, ready to call his name and rush into his arms. "Zoe." The voice cut through her reverie like a shard of glass. Isabella. Her sister emerged from the throng, her dark hair swept elegantly into a chignon, diamonds glittering at her throat, always immaculate, always untouchable. Zoe froze, unsure how to interpret the sharpness in her sister's eyes. "You've been abroad for 4 years, Isabella said coolly, her voice pitched loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "And the first thing you do upon returning is try to steal my man." The words didn't make sense. Zoe's chest constricted. "What? What are you talking about?" Isabella's lips curved into a cold smile, and she looped her hand possessively through Daniel's arm. "My man. Daniel Carter, your former boyfriend, my fiancé." The room tilted. Zoe's breath caught as her gaze snapped toward Daniel, searching his face for denial, even the faintest flicker of guilt. But Daniel only nodded, his expression unreadable. "It's true. We're engaged." Laughter rippled from the surrounding crowd, though some guests looked on with pity, others with curiosity. Zoe felt the ground slipping beneath her feet. "Since when?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Last month," Isabella replied, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "And of course you weren't invited. We all know what you were doing behind our backs. Daniel told us everything." Her father's voice boomed from behind her, merciless in its authority. "Zoe Rodriguez, your name has been removed from the family trust. You've lost your right to inherit Rodriguez and Carter Architects. You may leave now." The words were daggers, each one sharper than the last. Zoe's vision blurred. She had dreamed of returning to this moment and imagined offering Daniel the ring, the laughter, and the tears of joy. And yet, in a matter of seconds, her dreams were not just stolen. They were paraded before her as a cruel joke. She staggered back, her fingers trembling as they grazed the velvet box hidden in her handbag. The ring inside felt like a cruel reminder of her foolishness. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was going to propose to you. I thought we were meant to be." His eyes slid away from hers. "You were wrong." The room spun. Conversations resumed around her, laughter rising once again, as if her heartbreak was nothing more than a minor interruption to the evening's festivities. She clutched her bag and turned sharply on her heel. Her pride was all she had left. She would not let them see her cry. The night air outside was sharp against her skin, her breath forming white clouds in the cold. She walked without direction, the heels of her shoes striking the pavement like fragile defiance. Her phone buzzed a message from Sasha. "Where are you? You're back in town and didn't tell me. Meet me at the cafe near Central Park. I'm waiting." The cafe was warm and smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon. Sasha sat at a corner table, her expression softening when she saw Zoe approach. "My God, you look like you've been hit by a truck," Sasha said gently. "Sit down." Zoe sank into the chair opposite her, unable to stop the tears that spilled over now that she was away from prying eyes. "They're engaged," she whispered hoarsely. "Isabella and Daniel. My sister and the man I loved. They're engaged. And my father, he disinherited me. Everything I worked for was gone in a single night." Sasha reached across the table and took Zoe's hand. "Zoe, listen to me. Daniel Carter is trash. Always has been. You gave him your whole heart and he threw it away for status, for shares in your family's company. You're better off without him." Zoe shook her head, her throat tight. "I thought he loved me. I thought we had a future. I was going to propose." "Then thank God you didn't," Sasha said sharply. "Because he doesn't deserve you. None of them do. And you know what? It shows them what happens when they underestimate Zoe Rodriguez." Zoe blinked, startled by the steel in her friend's tone. Sasha leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming. "Men will line up to marry you when you're ready. But for now, why not have a little fun? Why not make Daniel pay for what he did to you?" Zoe frowned. "And how exactly do you suggest I do that?" Sasha's lips curled into a mischievous smile. She pulled out her phone and swiped to a photo. By getting with someone Daniel could never compete with. Someone powerful. Someone untouchable. Zoe's eyes widened as she stared at the image. A man in his early 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing blue eyes and a jawline that looked carved from stone. He was devastatingly handsome. The kind of man who made rooms fall silent when he walked in. "Who is he?" Zoe whispered. "William Garcia," Sasha replied. "He runs the European division of Garcia Global Holdings. A billionaire." "Daniel's uncle." Zoe's breath caught. Daniel's uncle. Sasha grinned. "Oh yes, the mysterious Garcia, whom almost no one in New York has met, because he's been in Europe for years. He came back last week, and rumor has it, he's very, very single." Zoe's pulse quickened. A dangerous idea took root in her mind, one she hadn't dared consider before. Sasha squeezed her hand. "Think about it. Nothing would cut Daniel deeper than knowing you were with William. Nothing. And who knows, maybe you'll even enjoy it." Zoe looked down at her trembling fingers. Her heart was still raw, bleeding from betrayal. But beneath the pain, a spark ignited a mix of defiance and curiosity. "Maybe I am in the mood," she whispered, surprising herself. Sasha's grin widened. "That's my girl. Let's teach Daniel Carter what happens when you break a Rodriguez's heart." Outside, the city pulsed with life, its lights shimmering against the dark sky. And somewhere in Manhattan, William Garcia, enigmatic, powerful, untouchable, was about to cross paths with the woman who would change his life forever. The bar was alive with jazz. Dim golden lights spilled across polished wood, catching the reflections of half-filled glasses and the laughter of patrons who had never once had their hearts broken in front of an entire room. The soft hum of a saxophone blended with the low thrum of conversation, creating an intimate and intoxicating atmosphere. Zoe Rodriguez sat at the bar, her elbow propped against the counter, a half-empty glass of bourbon before her. She rarely drank. Tonight, though, the bitterness of whiskey on her tongue felt like armor sharp enough to keep her upright, warm enough to numb the jagged edges of her pain. She turned the ring box over in her purse again and again, like a cruel reminder. She had almost given it to Daniel. She nearly fell to her knees for a man who never truly deserved her. The thought made her jaw tighten shame, mixing with anger. "Another?" the bartender asked. Zoe glanced up, then down at her glass. "Please. Make it strong." The bartender nodded, but a voice behind her cut through the music before he could pour. "Pour it for me instead." Zoe turned. The man who had spoken stood with effortless confidence, one hand resting lightly on the bar. He was tall, easily 6'3", dressed in a tailored suit that molded to his frame like a second skin. His presence filled the space, commanding without needing to demand. But his eyes caught her piercing blue calm, yet alive like a storm over the ocean. The bartender hesitated, unsure. Zoe narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me. That's my drink." The man's mouth curved into the faintest suggestion of a smile. "Then let me pay for it. Consider it my apology for interrupting. I don't need charity. And I don't give it." The words hung between them, sharp and intriguing. Zoe's heart stumbled in her chest. "Suit yourself," she muttered, reaching for the glass. But his hand moved faster, steady and deliberate, covering hers. The touch was brief, just enough for her skin to catch fire beneath his fingers. But when he withdrew, her pulse refused to settle. "Allow me to buy you another," he said calmly. "And if you're feeling generous, your name should go with it." Zoe stared at him, her pride prickling. She wanted to tell him to leave her alone, to walk away from the arrogance radiating off him. But something in his gaze, steady, unyielding, and oddly magnetic, held her there. She tilted her head. "What do you want from me?" He studied her, as if weighing the truth of her question. Then, without hesitation, he said, "I want to marry you." The air seemed to vanish from the room. For a heartbeat, Zoe thought she'd misheard him. "You want to what, marry you?" He repeated, his voice calm, almost matter-of-fact, as though suggesting a walk in the park rather than a lifelong vow. Zoe let out a disbelieving laugh. "Is this how you pick up women? By skipping the small talk and going straight to proposals? Only the ones worth it." Her laughter faltered. Her chest tightened, confused by the surge of heat that rushed through her veins. She hated how his words stirred something profound inside her, an ache she thought she'd buried hours ago. "She said you don't even know me." Her voice sharper than she intended. "I know enough," he countered. "I know you've been hurt. I know you're trying to drown it in bourbon. And I know you're not the woman who settles for less than she deserves." Zoe's throat tightened. She hated him for being right. Still, she managed, "You don't just walk up to a stranger and suggest marriage. That's wild. Insane." He echoed, the faintest glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Or the only kind of choice that makes sense." Zoe shook her head. "You must think very highly of yourself." He leaned closer, his rich, clean, and devastating cologne slipping into her senses. "No, I think very highly of you." Her pulse betrayed her quickening. She hated herself for the way her lips parted, the way her body leaned just slightly forward, as if against her better judgment. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice low. "William," he said. "William Garcia." The name struck her like a match against stone. Her friend's voice rang in her memory. Daniel's uncle. Billionaire. Untouchable. Zoe blinked, trying to mask her surprise. Garcia, she repeated, feigning casualness. Any relation to Daniel Carter? His expression shifted ever so slightly. Family is complicated, he said finally. That was all he offered, and all she needed. Her mind spun, connecting the threads. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. Why me? She asked. Why not any of the women throwing themselves at you right now? Because you didn't throw yourself at me, William said. You looked me in the eye. You challenged me. And because you intrigue me. Zoe's breath caught. This was madness, pure madness. And yet, as she stared into his eyes, she couldn't help but wonder, wasn't madness better than despair? She lifted her glass, the bourbon catching the golden light. If I were to say yes, hypothetically, what then? Then William said, his voice steady. Tomorrow you meet me at City Hall, 10 a.m. Bring your ID, and we see just how brave you really are. Zoe's hand trembled around her glass. A dozen voices screamed at her to walk away, laugh in his face, and escape, before this stranger unraveled what was left of her fragile dignity. But another voice, quieter, deeper, whispered that this was her chance. A chance to rise from the ashes, reclaim her power, and hurt Daniel in the way he had hurt her. And a chance at something else. Her lips curved into a dangerous smile. 10 a.m., she said softly. Don't be late. The next morning, the sun rose over Manhattan, pale and cold, against the steel skyline. Zoe stood outside City Hall, her heart pounding in her chest. She wore a simple navy dress, her curls pulled back a shade of lipstick, bold enough to hide the tremor in her soul. She told herself she was here for revenge, for defiance, for herself, not for the man whose presence already haunted her thoughts. William was already waiting, leaning against the stone steps like he owned the building. The morning light carved sharp lines across his face, and for a fleeting moment, Zoe's breath caught at the sight of him. You came, he said, his gaze unwavering. You sound surprised, she replied, though her voice wavered despite her effort. Not surprised, he said. Impressed. They stood there, silence stretching between them, filled only by the hum of the city. Then William extended his hand. Shall we? Zoe hesitated only a moment before slipping her fingers into his. His grip was firm, steady, unyielding, the kind of grip that promised he would not let go, no matter what storms might come. Inside City Hall, the ceremony was swift, the officiant's words a blur. Zoe barely registered the formalities, her heart hammering, as she repeated vows she never expected to speak to a stranger. And yet, something shifted when William slid the simple band onto her finger, something terrifying and exhilarating. Congratulations, the officiant declared. You are now husband and wife. Husband. Wife. Zoe glanced up at William, and for the first time she realized she had stepped into something far larger than revenge. His eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. But beneath that steel, she swore she caught a flicker of something else. Something dangerous. Something that felt like destiny. The elevator whispered upward, smooth as glass, carrying Zoe into the clouds. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror-polished steel walls, wide brown eyes nervous but defiant. Lips painted in a shade bolder than her heart felt. Curls pinned neatly at the crown of her head. She adjusted the strap of her handbag, inhaling sharply, as the numbers ticked higher. The doors opened with a soft chime. Before her stretched a penthouse, unlike anything she had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline of Manhattan in glittering steel and glass. The living room was vast, yet almost impersonal, decorated in muted tones of slate and ivory, as though designed by someone who valued perfection more than warmth. Zoe stepped in cautiously, her heels muffled against the marble floor. "So this is where billionaires live," she murmured under her breath. "You sound disappointed," came William's voice. She turned. He stood at the far end of the room near the bar cart pouring a drink, dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked devastatingly composed, as though marrying a stranger yesterday had been nothing more than a business errand. "I expected something flashier," Zoe admitted, her tone dry. William's mouth curved slightly. "I don't care for unnecessary glitter function over spectacle." Zoe let her gaze sweep over the cold perfection of the space. "Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in making a palace feel like a museum. Better a museum than a circus." Their eyes met, and for a moment Zoe forgot to breathe. The intensity in his gaze was a challenge, but also strangely an invitation. She looked away first, forcing a casual laugh. "Relax, Mr. Garcia. I'm not here to redecorate your life." "Good," he said smoothly, sipping from his glass. "Because this isn't your home." Zoe blinked, stung. "Excuse me. You can stay here for appearances." William continued, his tone even. "But don't mistake this arrangement for more than it is. I'll find you another place. Consider this temporary." Zoe's pride flared hot. "I'm your wife, William, at least legally. And unless you want your grandmother or the press to sniff out the truth, we'll have to act like it's more than temporary." His jaw tightened. Something flickered in his eyes for a second. Annoyance, perhaps, or reluctant acknowledgement. Then he set down his glass with quiet finality. "Fine," he said. "But don't touch my study or my bedroom." "Relax," Zoe shot back, folding her arms. "I wouldn't want to catch a billionaire snoring anyway." For the first time, a sound that was dangerously close to laughter escaped him. It was brief, low, and gone almost as quickly as it appeared. But it sent a strange warmth spiraling through her chest. That night, Zoe lay awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling. The city hummed softly outside the windows, its lights bleeding faintly into the room. She should have felt triumphant after all. Hadn't she achieved her goal? Married the one man Daniel could never compete with. And yet her chest ached with a restlessness she couldn't name. Somewhere down the hall she heard footsteps, steady and deliberate. For a reckless moment, she imagined him stopping at her door, his hand resting against the wood, and what it might feel like if he stepped inside. But the footsteps continued, fading into silence. Zoe emerged from her room the following morning to smell freshly brewed coffee. William stood in the kitchen flipping through financial documents while Milo, his golden retriever, wagged his tail impatiently at his feet. "Good morning," Zoe said, forcing cheer into her voice. William glanced up briefly. "Morning." Milo bounded over to her tail, wagging furiously. Zoe crouched, laughing, as the dog licked her hand. "At least someone's happy to see me," William said. "Don't spoil him," but his voice had no true edge. Zoe rose, brushing back her hair. "Coffee. I've already poured one." He nodded to the counter where a steaming mug awaited her. She blinked, surprised. "You made me coffee?" "I made myself coffee," he corrected. "Yours was incidental." Still, the gesture softened something inside her. She lifted the mug, inhaling deeply. "Well, incidental or not, thank you." He said nothing, but she swore she saw the faintest flicker of amusement cross his face as he returned to his papers. Days blurred into a rhythm of uneasy coexistence. Zoe filled the penthouse with touches of herself, throw pillows in bold colors, vases of fresh lilies, and a framed sketch she had drawn years ago. Each time William returned from work, his eyes flicked toward the changes, with an almost imperceptible sigh. But he didn't stop her. "Your place was suffocating," she told him once, fluffing a pillow. "You should thank me. Remind me to send you an invoice for unauthorized decorating," he replied dryly. Yet he never moved a thing back. Sometimes she caught him watching her, when he thought she wasn't looking, when she laughed on the phone with Sasha, when she sat sketching at the balcony with Milo curled at her feet, when she hummed to herself while cooking dinner in a kitchen that had probably never seen a home-cooked meal. And sometimes she found herself watching him too, the way his shoulders carried the weight of the world, when he thought no one noticed the rare moments when his jaw unclenched and he allowed himself a fleeting smile. One evening, Eleanor Garcia arrived unannounced. William's grandmother swept into the penthouse with the elegance of royalty, her silver hair pinned in a neat bun, her cane tapping lightly against the floor. "Darling," she exclaimed, opening her arms to Zoe. "So this is the woman you've been hiding from me." Zoe flushed, caught off guard by the warmth in Eleanor's eyes. "It's such an honor to meet you, Mrs. Garcia." Eleanor, the older woman, corrected firmly. "Family uses first names." She turned, fixing William with a sharp look. "And you, William, should be ashamed of yourself. Not telling me you'd found such a stunning wife." William cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "It was sudden. Love often is," Eleanor said, her gaze twinkling as it swept between them. "Now tell me everything." "How did he propose?" Zoe froze. William's eyes flicked to hers, and for a heartbeat neither spoke. Then Zoe lifted her chin, forcing a smile. "Well, it wasn't exactly traditional, but neither of us is the conventional type." Eleanor leaned forward eagerly. "Details, dear. Spare no details." Zoe's mind raced. And before William could stop her, she launched into a story, part truth, part invention, about a chance meeting, a hidden map, a daring question beneath the lights of a bar. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, William's eyes softened, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. When Zoe finished, Eleanor clapped her hands, delighted. "Marvelous, William. You finally did something right." That night, after Eleanor left, silence hung heavy between them. Zoe turned to William, daring a smirk. "You're welcome. I saved you from looking like a robot in front of your grandmother." His gaze lingered on her, unreadable. Then quietly he said, "You were convincing." Something in his tone made her chest tighten, though she told herself not to read into it. But perhaps the strangest moment came late one night. Zoe sat on the balcony she had claimed as her sanctuary, sketching by the faint glow of the city lights. Her pencil moved across the page, shaping arches and curves, the beginnings of something she barely understood. William appeared in the doorway, watching her. "You should be sleeping," he said softly. "And miss this view." She gestured to the skyline. "I'll sleep when New York does." He stepped closer, his presence wrapping around her like gravity. "What are you drawing?" Zoe hesitated, then turned the sketchpad toward him. "An idea. Something that doesn't exist yet. But maybe one day." His eyes traced the lines carefully, his face unreadable. At last he said, "It's beautiful." The sincerity in his tone startled her. She looked up, meeting his gaze. For a heartbeat, the city disappeared, and all she could see was the man before her. Not the billionaire, not the stranger she had married, but someone real, someone who for just that moment let his guard down. Her breath caught. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words tangled on her tongue. William cleared his throat abruptly, stepping back. "Don't stay out too late," he said, his voice cool again. And then he was gone, leaving Zoe alone with the sketch, her racing pulse, and the terrifying thought that this reckless marriage might not remain an arrangement much longer. The rain had been relentless all day, smearing the skyline into streaks of gray beyond the penthouse windows. Zoe stood at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled, her hands dusted with flour. A faint tune hummed from her lips as she bent over the counter, carefully shaping cinnamon rolls. Milo lounged at her feet, tail wagging with lazy contentment, his head tilting whenever she spoke to him. "You're the only one who appreciates me around here," she murmured, brushing his fur with her toes. "At least you don't scowl whenever I bring color into this mausoleum." Milo barked once, as if in agreement. She laughed softly, though the sound felt fragile. Since their marriage, she had tried God. She had tried to carve out a corner of warmth in William's cold, pristine world. She filled the penthouse with Lily's cooked meals that filled the sterile kitchen with life, and even coaxed Milo into curling beside her sketch pad during long nights. But William's gaze remained unreadable, his walls impenetrable. And yet, every so often there were cracks, small ones. A word softer than expected. A glance that lingered too long. The memory of him studying her sketches still pulsed through her, dangerous and intoxicating. She shook the thought away, turning back to her rolls. "Don't look at me like that, Milo. These are for him, not you." The dog whined, hopeful anyway. When William returned that evening, the penthouse smelled of sugar and spice, warm against the damp chill he carried in with him. He loosened his tie, his expression weary, and paused when he saw the tray of pastries on the counter. "What's this?" he asked. "Peace offering," Zoe said brightly, though nerves coiled in her stomach. "Cinnamon rolls. Try one." William hesitated. "I don't eat sweets for breakfast." "It's not breakfast," she countered. "It's dinner dessert. And you've had a long day. Try." For a long moment, he studied her, the silence stretching. Then, with a resigned sigh, he picked up a roll and took a bite. Zoe watched him anxiously. "Well," his lips curved almost imperceptibly. "Not terrible." Relief burst through her, foolish and unbidden. "Not terrible? That's the highest praise I'll ever get from you, right?" "Possibly," he admitted. Her laughter slipped out before she could stop it, filling the space between them. For a fleeting second it felt almost normal, like they weren't strangers bound by paper, but two people stumbling toward something real. Then Milo barked, drawing their attention. He pawed at the counter nose, twitching at the scent of sugar. "Don't even think about it," William warned sharply. Zoe bent down, ruffling the dog's ears. "Relax, he's just curious. I'll give him a tiny bite." "No." William's tone hardened. Zoe froze, glancing up. "It's just a bite, William. He's fine." But William was already crossing the room, his jaw set. "You don't understand. Milo has a strict diet. Anything outside of it could make him sick. I'm not poisoning your dog." Zoe snapped, her pride flaring. "I was just—" "You don't know what you're doing." He cut in, his voice sharp enough to slice through her defenses. The words hit harder than she expected. She straightened her chest tight, her voice trembling with anger. "Maybe that's what you think about me. I don't know what I'm doing, that I don't belong in your world." Silence crashed between them. Rain battered the windows, thunder rolling low in the distance. William's expression remained unreadable, but his damn eyes burned with something she couldn't name. Frustration, fear. Finally, he turned away. "Just be careful," he muttered softer now. "Please." Zoe swallowed, guilt pricking at her, but pride held her tongue. She said nothing, retreating to her room, with Milo padding at her heels. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her chest. Hours later, Zoe woke to the sound of retching. Heart lurching, she shot out of bed to find Milo in the hallway, his body heaving, eyes glassy with pain. "Oh, God," she whispered, kneeling beside him. Panic surged through her veins. Had he eaten something? Had she William? Her voice cracked, desperate. "William, help!" Doors flew open. Within seconds, William was at her side, crouching low, his hand steady on Milo's trembling frame. "What happened?" he demanded. I don't know," Zoe stammered. "He was fine earlier. And then he just William's eyes snapped to hers, cold with fury. What did you give him? Nothing. I swear, Zoe. His voice was low, lethal. Tears burned her eyes. Just a crumb, William. A crumb. I didn't think. He closed his eyes briefly, jaw clenched. Then he scooped Milo into his arms, his movements swift and efficient. We're going to the vet. Now. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Zoe sat rigid in the plastic chair, her hands clenched in her lap, every tick of the clock tightening the knot in her stomach. William paced like a caged animal, his face carved from stone. When the vet finally emerged, Zoe jumped to her feet. Milo is stable, the doctor said. The food upset his stomach, but fortunately, it was nothing toxic. He'll recover. Just keep him on his prescribed diet. Relief collapsed Zoe's chest, tears spilling unchecked. Thank God. But William's expression remained grim. He thanked the vet curtly, then turned to Zoe once they stepped outside into the damp night. You could have killed him, he said flatly. The words gutted her. I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't erase consequences. His gaze cut into her colder than the rain dripping from his hair. From now on, stay away from Milo's food. Please stay away from anything that could endanger him. Zoe's throat closed. You think I'm reckless because I don't care. I think you don't understand the weight of responsibility, he snapped. Her pride broke shards cutting into her chest. I've been trying, William. Trying to make this work. To bring life into your perfect, untouchable world, and all you see is failure. His silence was answer enough. She turned away, tears hot against her skin, her voice shaking. If I'm such a burden to you, you should have left me at City Hall. You should let me walk away. For the first time, his mask cracked. Pain flickered across his features, raw and fleeting, before he closed it off again. Maybe I should have, he whispered. The words shattered her. Neither spoke the rest of the ride home. That night, Zoe packed a small bag. She couldn't bear the suffocating walls, the tension that turned every breath into a battle. She scribbled a note, 2 words, nothing more. I'm sorry, and left it on the counter. Milo lifted his head as she slipped out, his eyes full of questions she couldn't answer. The city swallowed her whole as she stepped into the rain, her heart breaking in ways Daniel's betrayal never had. Because this time, it wasn't just about pride or revenge. This time, it was about a man she had begun to care for, a man whose disappointment cut deeper than she ever imagined possible. William stood alone in the kitchen in the penthouse, the note trembling. He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers against the bridge of his nose. He told himself it was better this way. That distance was safer. That letting her in would only lead to ruin. But as the storm raged outside, he realized the silence of his perfect home had never felt emptier. The rain had stopped by morning, but Zoe still carried the storm inside her. She stood at the window of Sasha's modest Brooklyn apartment, watching the city awaken. Yellow cabs honked impatiently. Coffee carts steamed on street corners, and strangers hurried along the sidewalks with umbrellas tucked under their arms. Life moved on with careless indifference, like her heart hadn't cracked open the night before. You barely slept, Sasha said, emerging from the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Zoe. Do you want to talk about it? Zoe shook her head, wrapping her hands around the mug for warmth. There's nothing to say. He doesn't trust me, and maybe he's right. Sasha arched a brow. You mean William? The name alone made Zoe's chest ache. Yes. Everything I do feels like a mistake in his eyes. Maybe I don't belong in his world. Or maybe he's too used to being alone. Sasha countered gently. You're not the problem, Zoe. He is. Zoe forced a weak smile, but said nothing. She didn't want to admit how deeply William's words had cut her, how much she missed even the cold steadiness of his presence. Instead, she turned to the stack of papers on the coffee table. Floor plans, sketches, design proposals, all remnants of the dream she had clung to long before William Garcia had entered her life. "I have to focus," she said, more on myself than on Sasha. "At work, on proving I can stand alone without him, without my family." Sasha nodded. "Then start with the competition, the museum project." Zoe's pulse quickened. The Cosmic Eye competition, an open call for architectural firms to design the new wing of the Museum of Modern Art. Winning would mean recognition, credibility, and the chance to silence everyone who had doubted her, and prove to William, her family, and herself that she was more than just a pawn in someone else's game. Days blurred into nights as Zoe worked tirelessly in Sasha's small apartment. She sketched until her fingers cramped, built models from cardboard and clay, researched materials, and poured every ounce of herself into the design. The concept became her obsession, a cosmic eye, a lens into infinity, a place where art and humanity could converge beneath the shimmering geometry of light. It wasn't just architecture. It was her heart made tangible. Sasha watched her with admiration tinged with worry. "You're burning yourself out," she said one evening. Zoe shook her head, eyes still fixed on her sketches. "This is the only thing keeping me upright." But in the quiet hours of the night, when exhaustion finally dragged her toward sleep, her thoughts betrayed her. She remembered William's hand brushing hers when he took the coffee mug, the rare softness in his voice when he said her sketches were beautiful, and Milo's head tilted whenever she laughed. And she hated herself for missing him. The day of the preliminary presentations arrived. Zoe stood in the grand lobby of MoMA, clutching her portfolio. The air buzzed with tension as architects from across the city milled about, each eager to impress the panel of judges. Among them, she spotted a face that made her blood run cold. Isabella. Her sister moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, Daniel trailing beside her like a shadow. Isabella's firm, Rodriguez and Carter, was one of the competition favorites. She immediately spotted Zoe, her lips curving into a smile sharp enough to cut. "Well, well," Isabella purred, approaching. "Look who decided to crawl out of obscurity." Zoe lifted her chin. "I'm here to compete." "Same as you." "Compete." Isabella laughed, the sound dripping with scorn. "Darling, this isn't a playground. This is a severe stage. And you, well, you've always been more of a dreamer than a doer." Zoe's hands clenched around her portfolio, but she remained calm. "We'll see whose design speaks louder." Isabella leaned closer, her perfume suffocating. "Just remember, little sister, in this family, only one of us was born to win. And it wasn't you." She swept away before Zoe could reply, Daniel casting her a pitying glance that only fueled her fire. When Zoe's turn came, she stepped onto the presentation floor with her sketches and models. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, conviction steadied her. She described the Cosmic Eye as more than a building, a journey, an invitation to enter the infinite. She talked of starlight captured in glass, of spaces designed for art and human wonder. When she finished, there was a hush in the room. One of the judges leaned forward, eyes alight. "Remarkable. Innovative. We'll be seeing more from you, Miss Rodriguez." Zoe left the stage trembling, exhilarated. For the first time in months, hope surged through her veins. But hope was fragile. That night, as she packed her materials into Sasha's car, she realized her laptop was missing. Panic clawed at her chest. It contained every sketch, every file, every digital model of the Cosmic Eye. She searched, but it was gone. The next morning, headlines confirmed her worst fear. Rodriguez and Carter stuns judges with Cosmic Eye design. The photographs splashed across the papers showed Isabella standing proudly beside Zoe's stolen work. "No," Zoe whispered, her hands shaking as she clutched the paper. She wouldn't. But she had. Isabella had stolen everything. Sasha swore under her breath. That witch. We have to fight this. Zoe's chest heaved, tears threatening. How? Without proof. It's just my word against hers. And she has Daniel Father, the entire board, on her side. Then we find proof. Sasha insisted. We don't give up. Zoe wanted to believe her, but despair coiled like a serpent in her chest. 2 nights later, the city swallowed her whole. She was walking home from a late meeting with potential investors when she felt the shadow behind her. The streets of Soho were too quiet, and the air was heavy and uneasy. "Excuse me," a voice drawled. Before she could turn, a hand clamped over her mouth. Another gripped her arm, yanking her into the alley. She struggled, kicking, muffled screams tearing from her throat. "Stop fighting," the man hissed. "It'll be easier." Terror ripped through her. She clawed at his arm, twisted, tried to bite, but he was stronger. A second man appeared, shoving her into a waiting van. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed her. She was bound, gagged, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might burst. Panic blurred her thoughts until one name rose above the chaos. William. Would he even know she was gone? Would he care? Her captors spoke in low voices as the van rattled across uneven streets. "The boss says, keep her quiet. No marks. She needs to disappear for a while." "Boss," the other snorted. "You mean the sister? Rich bitch paid us plenty." Isabella. Rage cut through Zoe's fear like lightning. Her own sister had orchestrated this. Not satisfied with stealing her work, Isabella wanted her silenced completely. Zoe's throat burned with fury. She tried to say, "You won't get away with this." But the gag smothered her words. The men laughed. The van screeched to a stop. She was dragged into a cold, abandoned warehouse, shoved against a wall, her wrists bound behind her. The men left her there, muttering about shifts and payments. And for the first time in years, Zoe felt powerless. Truly powerless. Hours blurred. The damp chill seeped into her bones. She closed her eyes, forcing herself not to cry or break. But when the door creaked open again, she stiffened. "Let her go." The voice was steel, familiar and unmistakable. Zoe's eyes flew open. William stood in the doorway, tall and commanding, his gaze lethal as it swept over the room. His presence filled the space like thunder before a storm. The kidnappers cursed, fumbling for weapons, but William moved faster. A fist collided with one man's jaw, sending him sprawling. The other lunged with a knife, but William twisted his arm with brutal precision, the blade clattering to the ground. In seconds, both men lay groaning on the floor. William turned to Zoe. His eyes, usually so cold, blazed with something raw, fear, relief, fury, all tangled into one. He knelt, his hands trembling as they untied her bindings. "Zoe, are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. How did you? Doesn't matter," he cut in, his voice rough. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone touch you again." When the ropes fell away, she collapsed against him, sobs breaking free. His arms wrapped around her, firm, holding her, as though she were the most precious thing in the world. And at that moment, Zoe knew, despite everything, despite the lies, despite the walls, that William Garcia was the only man who had ever truly fought for her. The world swam in fragments of white and shadow when Zoe opened her eyes. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled her lungs. A steady beeping pulsed in the room, both foreign and reassuring. She blinked against the harsh hospital light until the blur softened into clarity, pale walls, a vase of lilies on the windowsill, and the faint drizzle of rain outside. And William. He sat in the chair beside her bed, his broad frame folded forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed, as though he'd been holding the world's weight for hours. His suit jacket was tossed carelessly over the back of the chair, his shirt rumpled in a way she had never seen before. His hands were clenched tightly, as if he was braced for battle, even in stillness. "William," her voice rasped, fragile and hoarse. His head snapped up instantly. Relief flickered across his face before his features tightened, settling back into control. "You're awake." Zoe tried to sit up, but pain tugged at her muscles. William was there in a heartbeat, steadying her with careful hands. His touch was firm, but gentle, the kind of touch that made her pulse stutter. "You need rest," he said quietly. "The doctor said you'll recover, but you need time." She sank back against the pillows, swallowing the lump in her throat. "How long have you been here?" He had hesitated since last night. Her chest ached, not from the bruises, but from the thought of him sitting vigil by her side. She wanted to thank him, but the words caught. Instead, she whispered. Milo Williams' mouth softened almost imperceptibly. "He's fine. Sasha's looking after him." Relief washed through her. She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "Thank you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. William shifted as though warring with himself. Then he spoke, his voice lower, rougher than she had ever heard it. "Zoe, seeing you like that." He stopped, jaw tightening. "It broke something in me. I can't." His hand clenched the bedsheet, as if anchoring himself. "I can't lose you." Her breath caught. She turned her face toward him, searching his eyes. For once, there was no mask, no armor, just raw, unfiltered truth. And it shattered her, because she had been lying to him since the day they met. Her heart thundered, guilt clawing at her chest. She had carried the secret like a stone in her pocket, constantly weighing her down, continually reminding her that their marriage had begun not with love, but with revenge. She couldn't keep it anymore. Not after he had risked his life to save hers. "William," she whispered, her voice breaking, "there's something I have to tell you." His gaze sharpened, instantly wary but attentive. "What is it?" Her hands trembled against the blanket. She forced herself to meet his eyes, though shame burned through her. "I didn't marry you because I wanted to." She began each word like glass in her throat. "At least, not at first." His expression didn't change, but she saw the flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. "I married you," Zoe continued, tears blurring her vision, "because you were Daniel's uncle, because I wanted to hurt him, to show him I wasn't one who couldn't betray me without consequences." Silence crashed into the room like thunder. William leaned back slowly, as though her words had struck him physically. His jaw tightened, his hands flexed once on his knees. So he said at last, calm but cold, "I was just a weapon, a pawn in your little war." "No," she cried, panic rising. "That's how it started." "Yes, but it isn't like that anymore. You have to believe me. I didn't mean it would turn into this." "Into what?" His voice sharpened, slicing through her. "Into me, falling for a lie. Into my thinking." He cut himself off, breath ragged. Her heart stopped. Thinking what? But he didn't answer. She reached for him, desperation burning through her veins. "William, please. It's different now." "You're different to me now." He rose abruptly, the chair scraping back. His eyes blazed with something she couldn't bear to name. Betrayal, anger, hurt. "Do you have any idea what it feels like?" He said, his voice low and dangerous, wondering if every look, word, and moment was nothing but strategy. "To know that while I was—" His hands curled into fists. "While I was protecting and fighting for you, you still held on to your revenge." Zoe shook her head violently, sobs spilling over. "It isn't like that. I swear it isn't. I care about you, William, more than I ever thought I could. I didn't expect it. I didn't want it. But it's real. But he only shook his head, his mouth twisting into something almost like a smile, but sharp and bitter. Real. His laugh was hollow. Nothing about this was real. Her tears fell faster, choking her. Please, please don't say that. I know I lied to you, but He cut her off, his voice suddenly quiet, almost weary. I don't know if I can believe anything you say anymore. The words gutted her. She watched as he stepped back, putting distance between them. His gaze lingered on her one last time, and for a moment she swore she saw something softer flicker there. Pain. Longing. But then it was gone. William said, his voice final. We need space. When you're discharged, you can stay with Sasha. I'll handle everything else. Space. Her voice cracked. William. But he turned, his broad shoulders rigid, and left the room. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Zoe in a heavy silence that felt like suffocation. The days that followed blurred together in muted colors. Doctors checked her vitals. Nurses adjusted her IV. Visitors came and went. But the only person she wanted to see never returned. Sasha sat at her bedside one evening, her expression tight with worry. He hasn't been back. Zoe shook her head, her throat aching. Not once. Sasha exhaled, muttering something sharp under her breath. Then she squeezed Zoe's hand. You told him the truth. That's what matters. But what if it was too late? Zoe whispered. What if I've ruined everything? Sasha's eyes softened. Then you fight for him, Zoe, the way he fought for you. When Zoe was discharged, William kept his word. A driver arrived to take her to Sasha's apartment. Her belongings, clothes, sketches, even the vases of lilies were neatly packed in boxes waiting for her. It felt like an exile. She stood in the hallway of Sasha's building, staring at the stack of boxes, her chest hollow. She wanted to call him, to beg, to scream, to tell him again that her feelings were real. They had grown beyond revenge, into something fierce, terrifying, and true. But when she picked up her phone, her courage faltered. She typed his name, hovered over the message field, and then set it down. The truth had freed her, but it had also cost her the man she had begun to love. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window staring at the city lights, her sketches spread around her. The cosmic eye stared back from the page, an unfinished dream, waiting for her hand to complete it. Her career was all she had left now, but even as she sketched, her mind betrayed her. She saw his face in every curve, his hands in every line, his voice in the silence. And she wondered if love once tainted by lies could ever truly be rebuilt. The hum of Sasha's apartment was different now. The once cluttered living room had been transformed into Zoe's makeshift studio, sketches taped to the walls, scale models scattered across every flat surface, and rolls of tracing paper stacked like towers against the window. Zoe stood at the center of it all, pencil in hand, her curls tied into a messy knot, exhaustion etched beneath her eyes. The faint sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the room with pale gold. Another all-nighter, Sasha asked, emerging with 2 cups of coffee. Zoe gave a tired smile. I had to. The competition deadline is in 2 weeks. If I stop even for a second, I'll lose momentum. Sasha countered that you'll lose your sanity if you keep this up, but her tone was affectionate. She set the mug beside Zoe's elbow. At least tell me you ate something. Coffee counts. Sasha groaned, but let it slide. She knew better than to fight Zoe when she was in this state, relentless, focused, almost desperate. Zoe turned back to her work. The cosmic eye had grown evolved. It wasn't just lines on paper anymore, an act of defiance, a declaration that she would not be silenced by betrayal, Isabella, or William's absence. And yet, even as she traced the arc of a vaulted dome, William's face hovered in her mind. She remembered his voice in the hospital, rough with fear. "I can't lose you." Her chest tightened. She tried to push the memory away, but it lingered like the echo of a song she couldn't stop hearing. At a sleek cafe downtown, William sat at a corner table with his laptop open, though he hadn't read a word in 20 minutes. His gaze flicked to the article glowing on the screen. Cosmic Eye Concept Stuns Early Reviewers. Independent architect Zoe Rodriguez emerges as a rising star. A photograph of Zoe accompanied the headline, her standing beside her model, her head held high, her eyes fierce and determined. Something inside him shifted. Pride sharp and unbidden, mixed with the ache that had refused to leave him since that night in the hospital. He had walked away because he thought he had to, because lies corroded everything they touched. But watching her rise on her own carved a hollow in his chest he couldn't fill. "Sir," his assistant interrupted softly, sliding a folder onto the table. "The investor committee is waiting." William nodded absently, closing the laptop. But long after he left the cafe, Zoe's face followed him. The day of the semi-final presentations arrived. Zoe stood backstage at MoMA again, clutching her portfolio. Her heart pounded, but this time she felt stronger. She wasn't here as the disinherited daughter of Rodriguez and Carter. She wasn't here as William's impulsive bride. She was here as Zoe Rodriguez, the architect. Next called a voice. She stepped into the light. Her presentation flowed like water. She spoke of infinity captured in geometry, spaces that reflected the human spirit, and light bending through glass like starlight through the cosmos. The judges leaned forward, captivated. She finished with steady hands and a voice that did not tremble. Applause followed, genuine, resounding. For the first time she believed she could win. But in the crowd, Isabella's eyes glittered with malice. Later that evening, Zoe sat at Sasha's kitchen table, where a small celebration of takeout and cheap champagne was spread before them. "To you," Sasha toasted, raising her glass, "for proving every single one of them wrong." Zoe clinked her glass, weakly, exhaustion catching up with her. "It's not over yet. Isabella won't stop until she destroys me. She's threatened because she knows you're better," Sasha said firmly. "That's the only reason she's fighting so dirty." Zoe sighed, resting her head on her hand. "I want to be judged for my work, not for my last name, not for my mistakes." Before Sasha could answer, Zoe's phone buzzed. A message appeared, but no name was attached, only a number she didn't recognize. "Be careful. Someone is planning to sabotage your final presentation." Zoe's stomach dropped. "Who sent that?" Sasha asked. "I don't know," Zoe whispered, her heart racing. "But I think it's about Isabella." Across the city, William stood at his penthouse window, phone in hand. He stared at the message he'd just sent from an untraceable number. He hated himself for interfering, but couldn't stand by while Isabella tried to destroy Zoe again. He had vowed to keep his distance. But distance didn't silence the part of him that still loved her. The sabotage came 2 nights later. Zoe returned to Sasha's apartment to find the door ajar, but the lock was forced. Her heart slammed in her chest as she rushed inside. The studio was chaos, sketches, shredded models, smashed, her laptop gone. "No." Her voice broke raw with disbelief. She knelt among the ruins, gathering scraps of paper, as though she could piece them back together. Sasha knelt beside her, fury in her eyes. "This is Isabella. Who else would go this far?" Tears blurred Zoe's vision. Everything I worked for." "No," Sasha said fiercely. "You still have your mind. You can rebuild. You will rebuild." Zoe wanted to believe her, but despair pressed heavily against her ribs. Then her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Don't give up. Start again. You're stronger than she is. Zoe stared at the words, her pulse racing. Who was sending them? And why did they feel like William's voice echoing in her heart? The following week was a blur of frantic effort. With Sasha's help, Zoe recreated her designs from memory, working day and night. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Coffee and adrenaline kept her going, but something deeper fueled her, a stubborn fire, a refusal to let Isabella win. And though she never admitted it aloud, every time exhaustion threatened to break her, she thought of the anonymous words, "You're stronger than she is." The night before the final presentation, Zoe stood on Sasha's balcony, gazing at the city lights. Her sketchbook lay open on the table, the cosmic eye redrawn with steady lines. She whispered into the night, "If you were the one sending those messages, William, thank you, even if you'll never tell me." The wind carried her words away. Meanwhile, in his penthouse across the city, William sat at his desk, watching the moonlight spill across the skyline. Milo lay at his feet asleep. William opened his phone, his finger hovering over her name in his contacts. He wanted to call her, tell her he believed in her and never stopped. But his pride chained him. His fear held him silent. So instead, he set the phone down, whispering into the empty room, "Win tomorrow, Zoe. Show them who you are." The auditorium of the Museum of Modern Art pulsed with energy. Architects, investors, critics, and journalists filled the seats, conversations rising like a restless tide beneath the chandeliered ceiling. The Cosmic Eye competition had drawn the city's elite, each eager to witness which design would win the coveted commission. Backstage, Zoe's hands trembled around her portfolio. She had redrawn every sketch, rebuilt every model, and memorized every line of her presentation. But her heart still pounded like a drum inside her chest. "You've got this," Sasha whispered, squeezing her arm. "Don't think about Isabella. Don't think about the board. Show them what only you can do." Zoe nodded, though her throat was dry. She wasn't just here to present a building. She was here to reclaim her name, her dignity, her future. The announcer's voice echoed. "Our next presenter, Zoe Rodriguez, representing ZR Studio." Applause rippled through the hall, polite but curious. Zoe stepped into the light. The stage stretched before her, the audience a blur of shadowed faces. For a moment, fear threatened to swallow her whole. Then she thought of the anonymous messages, of the voice that had echoed in her heart, even in silence. "Don't give up. You're stronger than she is." She inhaled deeply and began. "Good evening. My name is Zoe Rodriguez. Tonight, I want to take you on a journey, not just through architecture, but through the infinite." She unveiled her Cosmic Eye model, a structure of sweeping curves and crystalline surfaces designed to capture and refract light. This building is more than walls and glass. It's a lens, a reminder that art is not finite, that human curiosity has no horizon. As she spoke, her voice steadied, her passion spilling into every word. She described galleries that seemed to float, staircases that spiraled like galaxies, and ceilings that opened into vast skylights. She painted the vision of a space that was not just visited, but experienced, where people could look upward and feel the universe looking back. The judges leaned forward, captivated. Murmurs of awe threaded through the crowd. When Zoe finished, the applause thundered louder than she had dared to hope. And yet, her heart did not ease. She knew Isabella was waiting. Moments later, Isabella took the stage in a sleek ivory suit. Her smile practiced, her confidence radiant. "Good evening," she began, her voice honeyed. "I am Isabella Rodriguez of Rodriguez and Carter. Tonight, I present to you the Cosmic Eye." Gasps rippled through the audience. Zoe's stomach dropped. Isabella gestured toward her model, a replica of Zoe's design. Every curve, every detail stolen and paraded as her own. This design, Isabella continued smoothly, was born from the belief that art should reflect infinity. The cosmic eye represents lies, someone shouted from the audience. The room buzzed. Isabella faltered, but recovered quickly, plastering on a smile. As I was saying, another voice cut in. That's the same concept Rodriguez presented 5 minutes ago. A murmur of agreement spread. Judges exchanged sharp looks. Cameras flashed. Zoe sat frozen in her seat, fury and humiliation burning. Order, please, the moderator called. Isabella Rodriguez, are you claiming this design as your own? Yes, Isabella said firmly, her chin lifting. This is the work of Rodriguez and Carter. Zoe stood before she could stop herself. That's a lie. Every head turned. The spotlight shifted, catching her in its glow. Her heart thundered, but she forced her voice to carry. Those sketches are mine. That model is mine. I created the cosmic eye months ago. She stole it when she broke into my studio, and I won't let her get away with it. The hall erupted in whispers, gasps, and questions. Do you have proof? A judge demanded. Zoe's breath caught. She had sketches, but nothing that proved she had created them first. Isabella would claim fabrication, manipulation. Without evidence, her word meant nothing. Panic threatened to choke her. Then from the back of the hall, a voice rose. I can confirm her claim. The crowd parted as a man stepped forward, distinguished, silver-haired, his presence commanding. Dr. Addison is one of the most respected architecture professors in the country. I reviewed Zoe Rodriguez's work weeks ago, and she showed her draft process and vision. There is no doubt the cosmic eye belongs to her. Gasps filled the hall. Isabella's face paled, her composure cracking for the first time. Further, Dr. Addison added, lifting a folder that I have documentation she sent me at the time, digital timestamps and emails. Irrefutable proof. The judges conferred in hushed tones. Cameras flashed wildly. The crowd murmured with electricity. Isabella's voice shook as she tried to recover. This is a misunderstanding. My firm, enough, the moderator said coldly. Rodriguez and Carter are disqualified. Miss Zoe Rodriguez, your design will move forward to final consideration. Applause roared, echoing through the hall. Zoe stood, trembling, tears blurring her vision. She had won not the competition yet, but the truth. For the first time in years, she was seen not as Isabella's shadow, but as herself. Later, outside the museum, the night air was crisp, the city alive with horns and laughter. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust toward her. Miss Rodriguez, how does it feel to expose your sister's fraud? What inspired the cosmic eye? Will you win the commission? Zoe answered as best she could, her voice steady though her heart still raced. Sasha stayed close, shielding her when the crowd pressed too tightly. But as the reporters finally dispersed, Zoe caught sight of a figure at the crowd's edge. Tall, broad-shouldered, eyes like stormlight. William. He stood in the shadows, half hidden, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Pride, relief, longing. Her breath caught. She wanted to run to him, thank him, and ask if the anonymous messages had been his. But before she could move, he turned, disappearing into the city night. The ache in her chest returned sharper than ever. Back in her apartment, Zoe sat by the window, exhaustion finally pressing down on her. Sasha poured champagne, but Zoe barely tasted it. Her phone buzzed, another anonymous message. You were magnificent tonight. I told you you're stronger than her. Zoe pressed the phone to her chest, her heart aching. William, she whispered into the quiet. Across town, William stood in his penthouse, Milo at his side. He stared at his phone, the message he had just sent glowing on the screen. He could still see her on that stage, her voice fierce, her eyes blazing with conviction. She had owned the room, silenced Isabella, and risen higher than he had ever seen her. Pride swelled in him, mingled with the ache of distance. I should be there, he murmured, rubbing Milo's head. I should tell her myself. But instead, he poured himself a drink, letting the silence of his home press against him. It was safer this way, or so he told himself. The city was still buzzing the morning after Zoe's dramatic presentation. Headlines splashed across newspapers and online feeds. Architect exposes sister's plagiarism at MoMA competition. Cosmic eye concept shakes the architectural world. Zoe Rodriguez. From disowned heiress to rising star. Zoe scrolled through them with disbelief and exhaustion, her coffee growing cold. She had spent so long being underestimated, dismissed, and betrayed. And now finally people were beginning to see her for who she was. Yet beneath the pride her heart still ached. Every triumph was shadowed by the thought of William, the way he had watched her from the edge of the crowd, silent, distant. Sasha plopped down on the couch, snatching one of the newspapers. You realize you're officially famous now, right? Everyone's talking about you. Zoe managed a tired smile. I don't feel famous. I feel overwhelmed. Sasha leaned closer, lowering her voice. Whoever sent you those anonymous messages, they were right. You were stronger than Isabella. You proved it. Zoe's pulse quickened. She wanted to confess her suspicion that every word had felt like William's, that she could almost hear his voice woven between the lines. But admitting it aloud felt dangerous, like naming a ghost that might vanish if summoned. Instead, she said softly, I wish I knew who it was. That afternoon, Zoe received an unexpected email. Subject: invitation to dinner. From Dr. Addison. Dear Miss Rodriguez, I want to introduce you to a key supporter of your work, someone who believes in your vision as much as I do. Please join us for dinner this evening at Le Jardin. I think it is time you met your mysterious investor. Zoe stared at the screen, her heart racing. Her mysterious investor. The one who had backed her studio when she had nothing. The one who had allowed her to enter the competition at all. She had begged for their identity before, but was told the same thing every time. You'll know when the time is right. Tonight may be that time. Le Jardin was a place Zoe had only ever read about, a hidden rooftop restaurant in Manhattan, famous for its candlelit garden and sweeping views of the skyline. When she arrived, the maitre d' guided her to a secluded table beneath strings of golden lights. Dr. Addison rose to greet her warmly. Zoe, he said, kissing her cheek. You look radiant. Please sit. She settled into the chair, her nerves taut as violin strings. You said I'd meet my investor. Yes, Addison replied, his eyes twinkling. However, the reveal may surprise you. Zoe's stomach flipped. Moments later, footsteps approached. She looked up, and the world tilted. William. He stood framed in the glow of candlelight, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable, his blue eyes locked on hers, steady and searching. Zoe's breath caught. You? William inclined his head, a wry twist to his lips. Surprised. Her voice trembled. You were the investor all along. Dr. Addison smiled knowingly. I'll leave you two to talk. He excused himself with graceful tact, disappearing into the garden. The silence left behind was deafening. Zoe gripped the edge of the table, her mind reeling. Why didn't you tell me? William sank into the chair opposite her, his movements measured. Because it wasn't about me. It was about you. You needed to rise on your own, Zoe, without anyone thinking you had a man propping you up. Least of all me. Her heart clenched. But all this time, you were there. I was watching. He admitted, his gaze steady, supporting, quietly. Because you deserved the chance to build something without my name overshadowing it. Emotion welled in her throat, sharp and overwhelming. You believed in me when no one else did." His jaw tightened. "I always did." The words pierced her, a mix of comfort and pain. "Then why stay away?" she whispered. "Why let me think you didn't care?" He looked down at his hands, fingers interlaced. "Because when you told me the truth about why you married me, it broke something I didn't know could break. I didn't trust myself not to lose control. Distance was the only way I learned how to protect us both." Zoe's eyes filled with tears. "William, I made a mistake. I was angry, hurt, and desperate to strike back at Daniel. But that isn't what this is anymore. Not for me. I love you." His eyes flicked up, burning into hers. For a heartbeat, the air between them vibrated with something dangerous and tender all at once. But then he leaned back. His expression shuddered. "Love built on lies doesn't last, Zoe." The words cut like a blade. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "Maybe. But doesn't love also mean forgiveness?" For the first time, his mask slipped. Pain flickered across his face, raw and unguarded. He didn't answer. Dinner passed in strained silence. William spoke little, his focus on his glass of wine. Zoe tried to eat, but every bite turned to ash in her mouth. When the meal ended, William stood, offering her his hand. She hesitated before taking it, her pulse racing at the familiar warmth of his touch. They walked out together onto the rooftop terrace, the city glittering below. The night air was cool, laced with the scent of jasmine from the restaurant's garden. Zoe turned to him, desperation tightening her chest. "Tell me honestly, William, do you feel nothing for me now?" His eyes searched hers, stormy and conflicted. For a long moment he said nothing. Then softly he whispered, "Feeling nothing would be easier." Her breath hitched. "Then don't choose easily. Choose me." The silence between them stretched, fragile and aching. But before he could respond, his phone buzzed sharply. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "I have to go, William." But he was already stepping away, his walls slamming back into place. Zoe stood alone on the terrace, the city sprawling beneath her, tears stinging her eyes. She had been given the truth, finally. But truth without love felt like ashes. That night in Sasha's apartment, Zoe lay awake staring at the ceiling. The memory of William's voice haunted her. Feeling nothing would be easier. She turned onto her side, clutching her pillow. For so long, she had thought success would be enough, that if she built her career and proved herself, she wouldn't need anyone. But her heart knew better. What she wanted wasn't just the cosmic eye. It was William, and she didn't know if she'd ever truly have him. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, William stood on the balcony, the city lights flickering across his face. Milo pressed against his leg, sensing his turmoil. William poured himself a drink, but the glass remained untouched. He saw her face in everything, the way she had looked at him across the candlelit table. The tremor in her voice when she said she loved him, the plea in her eyes on the terrace. And damn it, he wanted to believe her. But ghosts of betrayal lingered, whispering that love born from vengeance could never last. He lifted the glass, whispering into the night, "If I let myself believe again, it'll be her undoing, or mine." Yet even as he said it, his heart betrayed him, beating faster at the thought of her name. The day of the final verdict dawned bright and cold. The sky over Manhattan, a flawless stretch of winter blue. Zoe stood at the window of Sasha's apartment, watching the city stir to life. Her sketches spread across the coffee table, proof of the battles she had fought and survived. This was it. Months of work, years of rejection, and a lifetime of being overshadowed came down to this moment. Sasha appeared behind her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You ready to claim your crown?" Zoe smiled faintly, though nerves twisted in her stomach. "Ready or not, It's today. Zoe, Sasha said softly, squeezing her shoulder. You've already won. No matter what happens in that hall, you proved you're more than Isabella, more than your family's rejection. You're you, and that's enough. Zoe's throat tightened. She nodded, holding the warmth of the mug like a talisman. Thank you for everything. The auditorium brimmed with anticipation when she arrived. Journalists lined the back walls, investors filled the front rows, and the panel of judges sat poised at the center. Isabella was there too, her smile brittle, her eyes sharp with defiance. The moderator's voice rang out. Today we announce the winner of the Cosmic Eye competition, the architect who will design the new wing of MoMA. The air thickened with silence. The winner is... Zoe's heart stopped. Zoe Rodriguez of ZR Studio. The room erupted in applause. Zoe gasped, her knees trembling. Sasha clutched her arm, laughing through tears. Cameras flashed, capturing her stunned expression as she accepted the award. The lead judge said that by handing her the certificate, this project is a vision of innovation, courage, and humanity. Miss Rodriguez, your Cosmic Eye will stand as a new landmark of New York City. Zoe's hands shook as she held the certificate. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She had done it. Against betrayal, sabotage, doubt, she had won. Reporters swarmed as she left the stage, microphones thrust toward her. Miss Rodriguez, how does it feel to defeat your sister? What does the Cosmic Eye mean to you personally? What's next for your studio? Zoe answered, as best she could, her voice steady, though her heart raced. The Cosmic Eye is about more than architecture. It's about resilience. It's about believing in light, even when everything around you is dark. The crowd applauded again, but as Zoe stepped out of the building into the crisp afternoon air, a strange emptiness tugged at her chest. She had her dream, but the one person she wanted to share it with wasn't there. That night, Zoe returned to her apartment, setting the award on the windowsill. The city glittered beyond the glass, 1,000 lights reflecting in her tired eyes. She whispered into the silence, I wish you were here, William. Milo barked softly. Zoe froze, turning toward the sound. And there he was. William stood in the doorway, Milo trotting happily at his side, his eyes fixed on her. He looked as though he hadn't slept in days, his suit slightly rumpled, his expression unguarded. Zoe's breath caught. William. He stepped forward, his gaze never leaving hers. Congratulations. Her throat tightened. You came. I couldn't stay away. The air between them vibrated with everything unsaid. I saw you today. William continued, his voice low. On that stage, standing in your truth. I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. Tears burned Zoe's eyes. I wanted you there. I know. He paused, struggling for words. I tried to convince myself to stay away, to tell myself love built on lies couldn't survive. But I was wrong, because even knowing everything, even knowing how it began, I can't stop. He stepped closer, his voice rough. Zoe, I love you. Against my will, against my pride, against every scar I carry, I love you. And I don't want distance anymore. I want you, all of you, for the rest of my life. The dam inside her broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she closed the distance between them, her hands trembling as they rose to his face. I love you too, she whispered, more than I've ever loved anything. And I don't care how it started. What matters is what we've built and can still make together. William's eyes burned with emotion. Then he bent, capturing her lips in a kiss that shattered the last of their barriers. It was desperate, tender, raw months of pain and longing poured into a single, perfect moment. Zoe clung to him, her heart soaring like the entire city had fallen away, leaving only the two beneath the stars. Weeks later, the construction site of the Cosmic Eye buzzed with activity. Cranes rose against the skyline, workers moved like ants across steel frameworks, and Zoe walked the grounds with a hard hat tucked under her arm. At her side, William matched her step for step, his hand brushing hers every so often, as though to remind her he was real. He was here. Investors greeted her with deference. Workers paused to nod, and reporters snapped photos. But Zoe barely noticed. What mattered wasn't the cameras or the accolades. The man beside her had once stood in the shadows, but now stood proudly at her side. As they reached the heart of the site, William paused, turning to her. "You built this," he said quietly, gesturing to the rising steel. "Not me. Not your family. You." Zoe smiled, tears prickling her eyes. "We built this. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." His gaze softened. "Then let's keep building. Not just this. A life, a family, a future." Her heart stuttered. "Are you proposing?" William reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring that sparkled in the sunlight. "Yes," he said. "Marry me again. Not for revenge, not for convenience, but because I can't imagine another day without you." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She laughed, choked, and was joyous, nodding through her sobs. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Workers nearby cheered as William slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. Milo barked happily at their feet, tail wagging furiously. And for the first time in her life, Zoe Rodriguez felt whole. Months later, beneath the canopy of Central Park, their wedding unfolded in a garden of white roses and golden light. Friends, colleagues, and even skeptics gathered as Zoe walked down the aisle in a gown that shimmered like starlight. William waited for her at the altar, his eyes locked on hers, every trace of pride and fear replaced by devotion. When she reached him, he whispered, "Just for her, Sunday morning will always be ours." She smiled through her tears, her hand tightening in his. And every morning after, the city around them paused as they exchanged vows, holding its breath for their promise. And when they sealed it with a kiss, the applause rose like thunder, echoing through the park, the city, and their lives. The Cosmic Eye rose behind them, a monument to resilience and love, symbolizing that even broken beginnings could lead to brilliant endings. Zoe and William Garcia, husband and wife partners, dreamers, walked into their future hand in hand. A sky full of tomorrows awaited them.